Yep. Unfortunately, that will pretty much do it. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken lose 4-1 to the Nashville Predators, one of the two teams that they still had an outside chance with a win of catching for a playoff spot, but with this loss, it's all but a done deal that they will not make the playoffs. Now, I suppose for what it's worth, the game itself was not quite as bad as the 4-1 score makes it seem. It was a pretty close game. Both teams, I think, played pretty well, so for the Kraken, at least there's the upside that it was a decently well-played game from them, certainly better than they played in the last game against the Capitals. But at the end of the day, a couple miscues and a couple bad bounces, either ones they couldn't get to bounce their way in the offensive end or bad bounces that go against them at the other end, just end up having this game turn into almost a microcosm for the season, where they just can't get anything to go their way, and it just seems like it wasn't meant to be. And it certainly didn't help that Saros was standing on his head all game long. And speaking of things that didn't help for the Kraken, it also doesn't help that, once again, they're still without both Vince Dunn and Jaden Schwartz. Both still technically listed as day-to-day, but Schwartz now has been out for almost a week, if not longer, and Dunn obviously quite a bit longer than that, going all the way back to that game against the Flames. As far as who's in net, they continue to go every other, so Grubauer gets the start in this one, with Decord having started the last game, and he played pretty well again in net for the Kraken. For the first two periods, he stopped every puck that was actually shot on him by a Nashville Predator, and while the third period didn't really go his way, he still had a pretty good night overall, came up with a couple big saves, and I would say gave the Kraken a chance to win. They just couldn't find a way to finish at the other end of the ice. And I suppose it is worth mentioning that even though it is the same group of skaters that we've been used to now for the last few games ever since Schwartz went missing from the lineup, Hackstall did decide to mix the lines up quite a bit to try to get something going offensively, going for the top six, or I don't know if you can really call it the top six, but a couple of familiar lines, putting the Gord line back together that we've been used to for most of the season, with Tolvanen and Bjorkstrand on either side of Gord, and then puts McCann back on that first line with Beniers and Eberle. Unfortunately, like I said, it really doesn't change the final score or how much the Kraken score in this game. Even though they do get better looks than they got against the Capitals, they still aren't able to finish. And the bottom six definitely was put into a bit of a blender, with Burakovsky then on a line with Tatar and Yamamoto, which doesn't really have a natural center. Yamamoto kind of ends up centering that line, but that's not really his natural spot. He still did a decent job there. And then the third line, you've got Belmar as a natural center with Tanev and Cartier on either side, which is kind of just three guys that were left. That being said, though, as the game gets started, the Kraken get off to a pretty good start. And although it doesn't necessarily show up in the shot totals, they really did press to be the first ones to score in this game through the first few minutes, with a number of chances, at least around the Nashville net. Yamamoto's the one that gets one actually on net, with a very good chance from right in the dead slot off a pass from down by the goal line. Saros just comes up with a very big save there for Nashville to keep Yamamoto and the Kraken off the board. Then there's a couple other ones, one that bounces off the top of the net, a couple that go just wide, and Alexiak towards the end of the first period ends up putting one off the post. The Kraken, though, just can't seem to find a way to score, and Nashville starts to at least gain some momentum towards the back half of the period, getting more shots actually on net, though none of them particularly dangerous, as Grubauer is able to come up with all of the saves, which even includes a Nashville power play midway through the period that they really never get anything going on. The Kraken do a good job of killing that off, and as we get into the final few minutes, it looks like we're destined for a fourth straight game of heading to the first intermission, with the score still tied at 0. Unfortunately, though, with just a couple minutes left, Nashville does end up getting on the board first. As the Preds get into the offensive end, they get a pass off from one corner down to the other, up high on one side, across the ice, down low to down by the goal line, which Grubauer is able to read well, so there's no real chance for a goal off this pass. So instead, they go for a pass across Grubauer's face, across the crease to the far side, where there's a guy waiting. And if this pass gets through, it is basically an empty net for him to shoot at, and probably a goal, unless Grubauer can come up with an absolutely spectacular save. But he never gets that chance, as the pass is broken up on the way through by Schultz, and unfortunately goes off his skate past Grubauer into the net to give Nashville the 1-0 lead. So yeah, just a really unfortunate bounce for the Kraken, and not much of anything Grubauer can do about it. So at the end of the first period, with the Kraken probably having the better quality of chances, if not the better quantity, they still are down 1-0, and we go into a second period where it stays pretty evenly played back and forth. Both teams end up with power plays early on in the period. Nashville first, then the Kraken. And on that Nashville power play, the Kraken actually get a good shorthanded chance to score themselves. A 2-on-1 between Gord and Tanev that probably is just one pass too many, as Gord does get a pass across to Tanev. That's read well enough by Saros that Tanev tries to go back across to Gord, which if it connects, it is a goal, but it doesn't connect, so they don't even get a shot off on goal. And then the Kraken are at least able to kill the rest of that off, get a power play themselves, which is killed off by the Predators. But although the Kraken don't score on the power play, they at least get some momentum out of it, which doesn't really last all that long. Eventually, towards the middle of the period, the Predators at 5-on-5 really take over the middle part of the second period. They get a number of good chances off, but Grubauer comes up with some big saves for the Kraken, really bailing them out of a couple minutes of some sloppy play towards the middle of the second here. Eventually, though, thankfully for the Kraken, they are in the final couple minutes of the second period able to at least even out the flow of play and make things a little bit easier on Grubauer going into the second intermission. And then the chippiness and spiciness of this game between the two teams really boils over with about 30 seconds left when ex-Kraken player and old fan favorite, not to put it at all sarcastically, Jeremy Lauzon makes a very Jeremy Lauzon style of play with 30 seconds left as he gets caught up with Tanev behind the boards after laying a hit and then just really leans into a holding penalty, which, I mean, they call it a hold. You could have called it interference. You could have called it roughing. He basically goes full WWE on Tanev as he hits him into the boards and then just picks him up and slams him on his back. Tanev, fortunately, is totally okay. He just kind of looks up at Lauzon like, what the heck, dude? But while Tanev doesn't, at least physically, take exception to the Lauzon hit, Yamamoto definitely does as he comes right in, gets up in Lauzon's face, a scrum ensues, and I think Yamamoto does at least get a sneaky little punch into the face of Lauzon as he recoiled away from that fight, holding his face for at least a second. There isn't any other calls other than the holding on Lauzon. The Predators not particularly happy about that, but I think the officials do at least get the right outcome of a Kraken power play. I think there's maybe an argument to be made for traded roughings between Yamamoto and, I don't know, pick someone from the Predators. Either way, though, with just 30 seconds left in the period, the Kraken pretty much had to score right off of the faceoff to start the power play, which they don't do, so we go to the third, with the Kraken still trailing 1-0. But at the very least, the Kraken are still on the power play for the first minute and a half or so of the third period, and they get right into the offensive end, get set up, and they get a beautiful passing play off around 30 seconds into the period. It's down by the net, up to Tolvanen across to McCann, and McCann with a, I wouldn't say wide open net, but he certainly has some net to shoot out with Saros still trying to recover from the puck being down by the net. He fires that shot off and just puts it high and wide of the near side top corner. Yep. That's just what I'm talking about. The Kraken in this game had no manner of luck or ability to finish when they had the golden opportunities like this one from McCann, which we all know full well, more often than not, McCann is putting that into the back of the net without too much trouble for the power play goal. Unfortunately, again, this one just misses the net. McCann looks to the sky as he goes to the bench. The puck ends up cleared to the other ice, so the Kraken change to the second unit for the final 30 seconds or so of the power play, which it takes them a couple of chances to get into the offensive end. The second time they actually do get in and set up, but there's only about 10 seconds left. The puck cycles up to Evans at the top, Evans down to Burakovsky on the far side. Burakovsky, with just about 5 seconds left on the power play, winds up and fires off a wrist shot, which goes into the net to give the Kraken the power play goal and tie the game at 1. An absolutely perfect snipe into the near side top corner over the shoulder of Saros from Burakovsky to get him his 4th of the season, as he has started to heat up here of late. Obviously, the injuries over the first half of the season and then slow start coming back from those injuries has not helped the goal total, but he is starting to look more like the healthy Burakovsky that we were expecting to see more of, and did see for a little bit of the first half of last season, but the injuries have obviously not helped that situation. Either way, he ties the game here. Evans picks up the primary assist as well as Bjorkstrand on the far side, and the Kraken even the game up here early on in the third period. Of course, though, because this Kraken team just can't have nice things, the Predators press right back the other way to try to respond, and while they aren't able to at 5-on-5, even with a couple chances and a pretty nice save from Grubauer, they do eventually end up drawing another call to go on a power play, which I gotta kind of agree with Gord. This was a bit of a soft tripping call. The guy just kind of trips over his own feet, and then Gord's stick ends up around his feet, so they make the call. Gord goes to the box, and within seconds on the power play, it's into the back of the net. I suppose for what it's worth, at least for Grubauer's sake anyway, he does come up with a pretty spectacular save right off the face-off. The puck gets right up to the Kraken net, and I think it's Ryan O'Reilly that gets a shot off in tight trying to wrap it around Grubauer, and he does lift it over the pad, but Grubauer is able to reach out and just get enough of his glove on it to keep it out of the net, but not enough of the glove to keep it in his glove, so it flings out to the far side, where of course it goes right to another Predator player. It's Josi who's come down into the play, and he fires off the rebound shot, which goes through a couple of Kraken players and just past Grubauer's shoulder to go into the back of the net and give the Predators the power play goal, responding to give them right back the lead just a minute and a half or so after the Kraken had tied it. And then, to make matters worse, a few minutes later, getting towards the middle of the period, it's more trouble off the face-off for the Kraken, following some pretty even play between the two teams. Again, I'd say this was a pretty well-played game by both teams overall, just the Predators had better finish at both the goaltending end and also the offensive end. And that shows up here where, again, right off the face-off, the Kraken lose a face-off, it gets out to the point, one pass over to Josi, he fires off the one-time shot, it gets through everybody, and I think you could probably make the argument that Grubauer is leaning a little bit too far away from the net to try to see this shot coming, so by the time he sees the shot go off, he doesn't really have a chance to get back into the middle of the net to make the save. Either way, he's doing his best to see the shot in the first place with the screen, and it goes into the net to give the Predators, right off the power play, the 3-1 lead. From there, the Preds continue to press over the next couple minutes for even more, as this game continues or maybe stays pretty chippy between the two teams. A very heavy-hitting game, almost 60 hits between the two teams in this game, and that really boils over to a head, at least in this third period anyway, with what has to be said was probably the highlight from a Kraken fan standpoint in this game anyway, as about a minute after the Preds take that 3-1 lead, a shot off the rush from Zucker is saved without any trouble by Grubauer. It's an easy glove save for him to make, so he catches it, the whistle is blown, and then Zucker still chooses to do the thing where a player will skate up and make sure the whistle is blown after a frozen puck, getting right up in the goaltender's face. But with the whistle having been blown, this being an easy glove save for Grubauer to make, and he's got it in his glove, the German gentleman doesn't take too kindly to Zucker still getting up in his face and acts in a not-so-gentlemanly way, as Zucker skates right up to him, and Grubauer just cross-checks him right in the, below the neck, right at the top of the shoulders. Zucker goes head over heels backwards onto his back, and did not take particularly kindly. He gets up and gets in Grubauer's face again. Grubauer just kind of smiles about it and backs off from it. It's one that, again, Kraken fans, I think, were going to like this one quite a bit. It wasn't, if you're a Nashville fan, you could probably see it as a cheap hit. I'm sure Nashville fans didn't like it too much, but it was fun to see that little bit of fire, and especially with the frustration of late, a little bit of that boil over as well, especially with this being very out of character for Grubauer. Look, if he was Jordan Binnington, this is probably something he does from game one of the season, but yeah, this is definitely out of character for him. Anyway, it didn't really seem to fire up the team too much more, as Zucker still ends up getting a breakaway a couple minutes later, which he doesn't score on. He looked like he really wanted to score on that breakaway. He even fires another shot that has absolutely no chance from behind the goal line at the net from an angle that there's no way it's going in after the save is made on that breakaway. Then eventually the Kraken do start to turn things back the other way, get a couple pretty good chances off on net at 5-on-5, and then a pretty good chance at 6-on-5 with empty net. But yeah, the Predators do hit the empty net after not too much time at 6-on-5 for the Kraken. A weird bounce off of McCann's skate leads to a breakaway for Forsberg, and it's a breakaway with an empty net, so he just kind of slides the puck into the net. That gets us to 4-1, and the Predators take away the 2 points. So like I said in the beginning, with this loss to one of the two teams in the wildcard spots, it pretty much means there's no chance the Kraken are catching the Predators, and we kind of already knew that after the last couple games, and the Predators now on a 14-game point streak. But it also means that with 2 points regardless of who they lost them to, it makes it that much harder for them to even catch either Vegas or LA. Now, they do play both Vegas and LA one more time, and neither of those teams have been playing very well either. So if the Kraken can go, let's say, 12-3 over their last 15 games, and one of those two teams continues to stumble over the backstretch, then there's an outside chance they find their way sneaking into that last playoff spot with something like 92 points on the season. But it's a real long shot at this point. So, at this point, I don't really know what else to say. Never mind about this game, but the season as a whole for the Kraken, it It sucks that it really does look like playoffs are not going to be in the cards for the team and things just haven't worked out for them. I mean, there's plenty of fingers to be pointed right back at the team, mostly for the slow start to the season, especially the early part of November and October. They just could not get things going in the same way that they did towards the early part of last season. And look, they weren't like necessarily fantastic at the start of last season either. They really made that happen in the middle of the season as well. But they haven't been able to finish when they need to offensively, and maybe some of that's personnel. Obviously, Sprong with the goal total he had last year, 21 goals, would be second or third on the team right now. And Donato was pretty good at goal scoring as well. So some of that finish certainly isn't there, and I think that has come back to hurt them a little bit. Now, Sprong wasn't great defensively, and this team has been better defensively this season than they were last season. So I don't know if you take that trade-off or not. Either way, even without those two, the guys that are on the team from last year, which is still the vast majority of the team, haven't really produced to the same level outside of maybe McCann's been close, all things considered, and Bjorkstrand certainly has stepped things up a bit. Dunn also has been very good on the back end, and they have missed him over the last few games. Who knows how things look different if Dunn's been playing since that game against the Flames. But with all that said, we can at least end this one on a little bit of a higher note. There are some guys that I think are worthy of stars in this game, even with the disappointing outcome. The Kraken played well enough as a team to at least be worthy of that. So with the Kraken 3 stars, as always, brought to you by the patrons over on Patreon. If you want to help support and decide the Kraken 3 stars, there's a link for that down below over on Patreon as well. The first star, I'm going to go with Andrei Burakovsky. He's the goal scorer, and he, again, has been picking it up of late. So hopefully this can carry over into next season, and he can, stay healthy, hopefully, until that point. Second star, I'll go with Philip Grubauer. I do think he had a pretty good game, and he saved almost every puck that was shot at him by a Nashville Predator. As far as pucks actually shot at him by Predators, he had an over 900 save percentage. 3 end up past him, so not quite 900 on the night. He got very close. Plus, I won't lie, it was fun to see that little bit of extra fire in the hit on Zucker, even if I'm sure Predators fans won't like it. And then the third star, Kailer Yamamoto had a pretty good night, but I honestly feel like Alexiak had especially a good first period, and most of the second period he wasn't really that present in the third, but he had a couple of good scoring chances. He had the one off the post early on in the first period, and then had a pretty good game offensively, at least for most of the game. So yeah, what the heck, I'll go Burakovsky 1, Grubauer 2, and then Alexiak 3. Let me know what you think though down in the comment section below, who your 3 stars would be if you'd even have 3 stars, and yeah, how we're feeling about this season as a whole as we wind down into likely the last 15 games of this season. Until next time, though, stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.